Tristan Thompson just admitted on a podcast that Khloé Kardashian basically forced him to get a vasectomy, and his exact words about it were something else. Tom Hardy has been fired from his own show, and the reason why is actually embarrassing. And Olivia Rodrigo just used the word pedophilia to respond to people who criticized her outfit. This is your celebrity news for this week. So, let's get into it. Kicking off this episode by talking about Tristan Thompson and Khloé Kardashian. Now, I don't know if any of you have been keeping up with Khloé's new podcast, Khloé in Wonderland, but if you haven't, you need to start, because she is giving us so much material to work with. So Tristan came on the show, and normally when exes do these kinds of sit-downs, it's, very diplomatic, very, we co-parent well, we respect each other. But Tristan he didn't do that. He came on and essentially confirmed that Khloé pressured him into getting a vasectomy. His words, not mine. So here's what happened. Khloé, on the podcast, literally said, and I'm quoting her, "I kind of gave him a little bit of an ultimatum." And Tristan's response to that was, "What, getting neutered? Sometimes you gotta lay them nuts on the table." I mean, he said that, out loud, on a recorded podcast, voluntarily. And then he followed that up with, "Sometimes you have to get forced into the right decision." So he's now confirmed that he did in fact get a vasectomy, that he did it because Khloé pushed him to, and that he apparently needed to be forced into it. Now, I do want to add some context here, because this isn't just funny, it's actually kind of wild when you look at the full picture. Tristan Thompson has 4 children with 3 different women. He has Prince, who is 9, with Jordan Craig. He has True, who is 8, and Tatum, who is 3, with Khloé. And then he has Theo, who is 4, with Marilee Nichols, the woman he cheated on Khloé with, which, if you remember, came out while Khloé was literally pregnant with True. So I think it's safe to say that Khloé's reasoning for the ultimatum was not without basis. But here's the detail that really got me. Khloé apparently has legal ownership of their frozen embryos. Tristan signed them over to her. So she has the embryos. She made him get a vasectomy. But he told the podcast he kept a sperm sample, quote, "just in case he finds a wife someday." I genuinely don't know what to do with that information. Let's look at what people are saying about this, because the internet has had thoughts. This person writes, "Khloé really said no more Tristan babies on this earth, and I fully support her." This person says, "He kept a sample just in case? The audacity of this man never stops surprising me." This person writes, "The way she legally owns the embryos and made him get a vasectomy, Khloé did not come to play." And then this one, which is honestly my favorite, "getting neutered." His words, he called it getting neutered. I cannot. You know what? That comment is right. The fact that he used that word, not anyone else, not a tabloid him, that is either the most self-aware thing Tristan Thompson has ever said or the least self-aware. I honestly can't tell which. And look, I think what's interesting here is that Khloé is getting a little bit of criticism online for the ultimatum thing. Like, some people are saying it's controlling, it's her being too dominant in the relationship. But I mean, let's be real. This is a man who cheated on her multiple times, who had a child with someone else while she was pregnant. And she still co-parents with him. She still has him on her podcast. She still treats him with a level of respect that honestly most people would not. Not trying to be shady about it, but the vasectomy ultimatum might be the most reasonable thing that's happened in this entire situationship. I do think that Khloé wins this one. By a lot. Now, speaking of people who apparently have massive egos and no one to check them, let's talk about Tom Hardy. So if you haven't been following the MobLand drama, here's the quick version. Tom Hardy was starring in a Paramount Plus crime series called MobLand. Helen Mirren was also in it. And then, allegedly, Tom Hardy was fired. Now, the official statement from his representatives is that the door is not closed. They're still in conversations, it's all very professional. But the leaks tell a very different story. Sources close to the production describe Tom Hardy as arrogant, constantly late, and with a difficult attitude on set. One person said, quote, "He swaggers around like a king." And here's where it gets interesting. Because the conflict apparently wasn't just with producers. It was specifically with the director and with Helen Mirren. Now, Helen Mirren is one of the most respected women in Hollywood. She has an Oscar, a Tony, a Golden Globe. She is described by everyone who has ever worked with her as a complete and total professional. So when your sources are saying she's a full professional, he's very, very arrogant, that's not a good look for you. But then, and this is the twist, Helen Mirren goes on Instagram and posts a photo of herself with Tom Hardy, with the caption, "Love you now and always." That's it. That's the caption. I mean, what is happening? Is this a PR move? Is this genuine? Is Helen Mirren just built differently and she's choosing grace over drama? Because if someone I was in a public conflict with got fired and the internet was talking about it, I don't think my first instinct would be a love post. People online are very divided on this one. This person says, Helen Mirren posted that and then went back to sipping her tea. Queen behavior only. This person writes, Tom Hardy has done this before. He was difficult on the Mad Max set, the Suicide Squad set. At what point does Hollywood stop hiring him? This person says, the love you now and always is honestly more devastating than if she'd said nothing. She's not angry. She's just done. And this one, he swaggers around like a king is sending me. Sir, you are not the king. Helen Mirren is the king. That last comment is correct. I don't have anything to add. Look, I think Tom Hardy is genuinely talented. I do. But there's a pattern here that's getting hard to ignore. This is not the first set where he's been described this way. And there comes a point where the talent stops justifying the behavior, especially when you're making things difficult for someone like Helen Mirren, who by all accounts shows up, does the work, and is kind to everyone around her. Helen Mirren posting that love caption is the most elegant read I've ever seen. She doesn't need to say anything negative. She just reminds everyone what class looks like, and the contrast does all the talking. Moving on. Because Olivia Rodrigo has something to say, and honestly, I think she has a point. So Olivia Rodrigo wore a baby doll dress to her concert in Barcelona. It was a fully covered up, floaty little dress, and the internet decided that this was somehow... Olivia Rodrigo wore a baby doll dress to her concert in Barcelona. It was a fully covered up, floaty little dress, and the internet decided that this was somehow inappropriate. People were calling it childlike, calling it not suitable for a performer, saying she should dress more like an adult. Now, for context, this is the same Olivia Rodrigo who has performed in sparkly bras, miniskirts, and tiny shorts. Nobody said anything then. Nobody had an issue with that. But the moment she shows up in a covered-up dress that people associate with a more childlike aesthetic, suddenly that's the problem. And Olivia did not let that go quietly. She went on the NYT Popcast and said, I'm reading this verbatim because it's important. What's really disturbing is I've been on stage in a sparkly bra and little shorts. That wasn't inappropriate. But me fully covered up in a dress people deem childlike was inappropriate. I think it shows how we normalize pedophilia in our culture. That is a very serious statement, and I actually think she's right. Think about what she's describing. She can be hypersexualized on stage and nobody blinks. But the moment she wears something that isn't sexualized, the moment she wears something that reads as innocent or childlike, that makes people uncomfortable. Why? Why is the covered up version the problem? She's also wearing a very similar dress on the cover of her new album, You Seem Pretty Sad for a Girl So in Love, which drops on June 12th, by the way. So this isn't random. This is clearly part of the visual identity she's building for this era. Okay, the comments on this are everywhere. This person writes, she said what she said and she's not wrong. We literally criticized a woman for being too covered up. Think about that. This person says, Courtney Love backed her up on this, and honestly, that's the most unexpected alliance of 2026. This person writes, Olivia Rodrigo said the quiet part loud, and people are mad because they know she's right. And then this person, who I think represents the other side. I think she's overreaching with the pedophilia comment. It was just an aesthetic critique. And look, I understand that perspective. I don't think everyone who criticized the dress had malicious intent. But I do think Olivia is pointing at something real, which is the way we unconsciously police women's bodies, including when they're less exposed. And that's a conversation worth having. I've been thinking about this one since it came out. And what gets me is how quickly the script flipped. The same people who would say she's dressing too revealing would also say this dress is inappropriate. There's genuinely no version of what Olivia wears that won't get criticized by someone. And I think that's exactly the point she's making. Also, separately, You Seem Pretty Sad for a Girl So in Love is a great album title. I'm just going to say that. Now I want to talk about something that happened at the Kevin Hart Netflix roast, because there's a lot going on there and I think people are missing the full picture. So Netflix aired the Kevin Hart roast, and roasts, as a format, are obviously designed to be shocking. You invite the most offensive comedians you know, you let them say things that would never be allowed anywhere else, and you call it comedy. That's the deal. But at this particular roast, comedian Tony Hinchcliffe made a joke about George Floyd. And that, understandably, did not land well. George Floyd's brother publicly called on Kevin Hart to stop Hinchcliffe, to pull the joke, to draw a line. Kevin Hart's response was complicated. He said, quote, "What do you want me to do? Drag him off the stage?" He acknowledged that the joke was not tasteful. He said personally, that's not how he jokes. But he also defended the roast format itself, saying that this is what roasts are. There are no rules. And then Chelsea Handler came in. She called out Tony Hinchcliffe and Shane Gillis directly, calling them racist and sexist, which then started a whole separate fight between Handler, Hinchcliffe, and Hart. So now you have three overlapping conflicts: Hart versus Floyd's family, Handler versus the roasters, and Hart versus Handler, all happening at once. People are very split on this. This person writes, Kevin Hart saying, "What do you want me to do? Drag him off stage?" is genuinely one of the worst responses he could have given. This person says, "I love Chelsea Handler for this. Some jokes should not be made. Full stop." This person writes, "It's a roast. Everyone agreed to the format. People need to stop being shocked when a roast is offensive." And this one, "The fact that George Floyd's brother had to make a public statement about a joke at a comedy roast is so sad to me. Like, regardless of what you think about the format, that's a real family." That last comment is the one that sits with me. I think you can have a conversation about roast culture and comedy and free speech, but there's a real family involved here, and that matters. I think Kevin Hart is in a tough spot because he's not the one who made the joke, but he also put this roast together, he's the headliner, and when something goes wrong at your event, you're the face of it. A roast is not a full answer when someone's family is asking you to take responsibility. That's just my honest take. And finally, I want to close out with Hugh Jackman, because this story has several layers and I think it's about to get a lot messier. Okay, so Hugh Jackman is having a rough few months. His new film, The Sheep Detectives, has a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes. Critics love it. But it has made $86 million at the box office on a $75 million budget. And the math on that is not good. You generally need about 2.5 times your budget to break even when you factor in marketing. So they needed around $188 million. They made less than half of that. Now, some people are saying the film underperformed because of the drama surrounding Hugh's personal life. Because ever since his divorce from Deborah Lee Furness and the news about his relationship with Sutton Foster, things have gotten complicated. Sources are now saying that Deborah Lee has been having conversations in Hollywood about Hugh, essentially reaching out to people in the industry and sharing her side of the story, which, if accurate, would explain why Hugh told interviewers this week that he is done staying quiet. His words. He's done sitting back and just taking it. Now, apparently, Deborah Lee also reached out to Sutton Foster directly, wanting a face-to-face meeting for what sources described as closure. And the theory floating around is that it was actually the relationship with Sutton that caused the divorce, not the other way around. That it wasn't just a post-divorce connection, but the reason the marriage ended. Hugh is apparently feeling increasingly isolated in the state of this. Hugh was one to make an I will introduce the divorce in Also Other Today. People he considered friends are keeping their distance. And he's simultaneously watching a well-reviewed movie underperform. Partly, some argue, is ended. Hugh is apparently feeling increasingly isolated in the Hollywood. Partly, some argue, because audiences don't want to root for him right now. People are taking sides on this one. This person writes, Deborah Lee didn't leave quietly, and honestly, good for her. She was with him for 27 years. This person says, Hugh Jackman saying he won't take it anymore is giving man who cheated deciding he's the victim energy. This person writes, the 95% on Rotten Tomatoes, but half the expected box office is actually so funny to me. Critically loved, publicly avoided. And this one, Sutton Foster agreeing to a face-to-face meeting with his ex-wife for closure would be the most chaotic thing to happen this year. Please let this happen. I mean, I don't disagree with that last person. That meeting would be something. Look, I think there's something genuinely sad about a 27-year marriage ending. Whatever happened, that's a long time, and that's real loss. But I also think Hugh Jackman going on a press tour to talk about how he's done staying quiet, while his ex-wife is telling her side, that's probably not going to help him. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is actually just not talk about it. But I guess we'll see. That is all I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed this video. We covered a lot. Tristan Thompson and his very public announcement, Tom Hardy and Helen Mirren's very different energies, Olivia Rodrigo making a point that I think genuinely needed to be made, the Kevin Hart roast mess, and Hugh Jackman navigating a box office flop and a very vocal ex-wife at the same time. I want to know, out of everything we talked about today, whose side are you on? Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one. I'll also have more videos coming this week, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss them. And if you've been here the whole time, leave a blue heart in the comments. I always love seeing those. I'll see you soon. Bye, guys.